most of you on this call have been actively engaged in either welcoming a family or funding WelcomeNST to start to create NSTs that will welcome a family, or funding a team directly. So I wanted to just kind of step back and just take, since we have this kind of unique opportunity, I mean, it's so cool to have all these folks together. I wanted to just step back and kind of just give an overview of where we've been, and then we'll talk about where we're going. So as many of you know, in August of 2021, we were all sitting in our comfortable homes watching helplessly as Kabul fell to the Taliban. And some of you here, maybe lots of you, they're on this call, got a somewhat harried, probably not well thought through email, or maybe a text, or maybe an email and a text from me with a call to action. It said, form a neighborhood support team. We need families or groups of families to commit to welcoming an Afghan family into their community. I wrapped up my short message with this thought. Based on my personal experience with Afghan refugees, I cannot think of a greater blessing for our communities than to have the privilege of inviting them into our lives and calling them our friends. 1,500 people, some of you were part of this, stepped up to welcome 400 Afghans into your communities within just a few weeks. And amidst all the bumps along the way, we and you got to experience this truth for themselves. And all that before private resettlement had even become a reality in the US. I've since learned that this was the largest community-led resettlement effort in US history. Please raise your real hand or your electronic hand if you were part of this early effort. This is so cool. Please keep your hands up. And for those who have not raised their hands yet, please raise your hand if you have participated in the following, either by joining or funding this effort, these next efforts that I'm going to talk about. We went on to offer refuge to Ukrainians caught in the crossfire of a brutal Russian attack on their liberal democracy. Then Haitians, Nicaraguans, Venezuelans, and Cubans. We joined the Welcome Corps, welcoming refugees from across the globe. And most recently, we offered refuge to families fleeing from gang violence in Guatemala. All in all, 4,000 of you across 30 states have joined this effort, raising $3 million and welcoming almost 1,000 refugees to America. Pretty amazing. And I feel like we barely know what we're doing. Like us, many in America recognize welcoming the stranger as a core value that binds us as a people and defines us as a nation. Nason mentioned this himself. We feel it deeply as part of our covenant as Americans to both build and share the American dream. This big idea and the way it uniquely comes to life here in the US is so globally transformative that people from all over the world aspire to be part of it. As many of you have demonstrated, this new model empowers regular Americans to gather together with others in their communities, neighbors, fellow churchgoers, workout partners, friends, and pluck a refugee family from danger abroad and offer them refuge in their neighborhood. Then walk alongside them on the road to self-sufficiency. These new legal pathways for immigration put the gift of the American dream not in the hands of politicians and bureaucrats, but of people like me and you, regular Americans who are seeking a way to succor their neighbors who are suffering. And I know many of you know this, but I want to talk a little bit about what that means when we say people who are suffering. We're talking about people like the Khan family, and I've changed the names, by the way, whose 3-year-old child was kidnapped and murdered by the Taliban as payback for the dad's refusal to join them. They were welcomed by a huge team in a beautiful town with picket fences and tree-lined streets in Massachusetts, and are now safe, the parents working and speaking English, and the kids flourishing in school. We're talking about the Lopez family who was attacked by the Mara gang in Guatemala when they refused to allow their young son to enter their ranks, and today lives in Arizona, the dad and kids playing soccer regularly with several of the team members after work and school. And we're talking about Yulia, the single mom in Ukraine who barely survived with her three children as the Russian soldiers attacked, then occupied her hometown of Bucha. She and her kids are safe and exploding with life and opportunity in Utah, thanks to a huge team of about 50 people that includes ophthalmologists, civil servants, and even a rocket scientist. Yulia said this: "I've never met such kind and compassionate people as Americans. Kindness lives in your hearts. I'm grateful for my NST who took in my family. They helped us to recover and heal. I feel like a human being again. I thank them for their care and attention to us. At one point, I was saying goodbye to life, but now we live." Looking ahead to a family that's still seeking refuge, we think about Abdullah's family, who fled Syria due to civil war and associated threats to their lives, and have lived in the Zaatari refugee camp in Jordan for 10 years. They now have a 5, 3, and a 1-year-old. His wife says, "The days pass with difficulty and suffering, with hunger, thirst, and extreme weather. I cry for my children. I want them to live like humans, go to school, and have a homeland. I dream that we will live in safety, that we will have a homeland and an identity, and that we can work and contribute." And the Zaatari refugee camp is currently has not had water for 14 days. It's you who have caught the vision and breathed life into it. You are the mobilizers, the miracle workers, the game changers, and the trailblazers. And some of you are all of those things to be. You have initiated a ripple effect of intergenerational transformation for refugee families and for the families within your own communities across the nation, changing hearts and minds by your example. Because of you, WelcomeNST leads the country in private resettlement. Today, thanks to our visionary partners, the Welcome Corps and the Shapiro Foundation, and of course the White House, we have the greatest opportunity in over 40 years to multiply our collective impact. We have legal pathways that are open, at least for now, and we have funding to put this work well within reach. And to add a little more detail to Nason's point, that funding is equivalent to $2,425 per person that is welcomed. So it's just under $10,000 for a family of 4. And that's a grant that will help essentially offset the fundraising that needs to happen in order to welcome that family. We are here tonight because we need your help to take this vision and make it a movement. All the stars are aligning. The Cato Institute reports that based on their survey, 50 million Americans are interested in private sponsorship. Sasha Chanoff, founder of Refuge Point, stated, 2 million Americans across religious and political divides in conservative and liberal communities had taken steps to sponsor people abroad seeking to come to the U.S. These numbers represent a dramatic expansion of American capacity to welcome newcomers and demonstrate that sponsorship is a unifying force at a time when America's sense of common purpose is badly eroded. Close quote. At a time when we find ourselves not only divided, but stretched as a country, and in some cities overwhelmed by a crush of those huddled masses yearning to breathe free, and I would include Boston, my home city, in that description. Private sponsorship makes it possible to be true to who we are as Americans without adding to the burden of our shelters and the associated state budgets. Kathy Romeo, the leader of one of these sponsor groups, who's not here tonight because she's literally coming back from the airport to meet me, where she met a second family from Guatemala. She said, "I've watched my community be transformed through the lives of a refugee family. On my teams, we've had a 25-year-old and a 75-year-old. We've had Muslims, Protestants, and Catholics, liberals and conservatives, affluent and not, but this work unifies us all." This opportunity is ours today. Tomorrow, as we all know, has yet to be decided. No offense to Nason. And while this is true, mine is not a call to action motivated by fear, but by faith. As a person of faith myself, I have seen a power well beyond my own in this work. and I have felt God's love for his people who are suffering. I have also witnessed the magnificent, highly unleveraged power of our communities to step up and solve problems and meet needs in a way that no bureaucratic program possibly can. And I have witnessed the unique power of refugee families to, in turn, open our eyes, heal our hearts, bridge divides, and reconnect us with a broader purpose and with one another. As recipients of some of the greatest blessings that exist on earth, this work, while not simple or easy, is an honor and a privilege. So if you've considered, even for a moment, welcoming a family or another family, now's the time. This funding is available through July 31st. And again, just to reiterate, this is funding that's available to not to welcome family members or people that are related, but to welcome strangers. If this isn't the right time for you, we need you too. It doesn't have to be you who leads the team. Talk to your friends, your neighbors, your fellow congregants. Make an announcement at church or Rotary Club or wherever you gather. Hold an info session on Zoom. We will join you. And connect us with someone in your community who might be interested in leading a team. We call that person an ambassador. Once you connect us, we'll take it from there. And if all of this isn't your speed, please consider donating to fund WelcomeNST to find, train, match, and support the next NST. Dan Rather once said, one of the noblest ideals of our country is that anyone from anywhere can be an American. This is our time to be part of a movement that will define us, our communities, and our country for generations to come. Our collective vision, purpose, and rallying cry must echo the official U.S. motto adopted by Congress in 1782, out of many, one. So I'm going to turn it over from here to Wes Dillon, who has welcomed several families to his community, and then we'll move into the Q&A from there.
Liz, this is exciting, honored to be here. So, when our church was one of the early groups that sponsored an Afghan family, and early on, people in the community would say, well, why are you doing this? Like, what is the benefit? And as I look back over the last 2.5 years as we've done this, there are things that I wish I could tell myself 2.5 years ago, just to give myself and to give our team more courage. As Liz mentioned, I'm a minister of Four Rivers Church. We're situated in the seacoast of New Hampshire, about 45 minutes north of Boston. And over the past 2.5 years, our small church has welcomed 7 families here, 1 Afghan, 1 Ukrainian, 4 Haitian, and 1 from Guatemala. And the crazy thing is, we almost said no there at the beginning. There was a moment when the concerns about finances or experience with resettlement or having enough volunteers pushed us to a point where we thought, well, maybe the reasonable thing is we should just think about this and do some more research. But there were people on our team, my wife, who said we have to do this. They were adamant that we move ahead. And I am so glad that we did, because refugee resettlement, hands down, has been the best initiative our church has been a part of. But the story you should hear from me tonight is not about our group. I'm so proud of our church welcoming the Afghan family and the others, but don't think of that as extraordinary. Don't even think of welcoming refugees as extraordinary. What I have learned over the last 2.5 years, and this is what I would tell myself back then, is that every community has people with the background and the experience suited for this work. Most of them are sitting on the bench and just waiting to be asked. If the leaders of the Four Rivers teams were here on this call tonight, they would insist on telling you, I'm just using my skill set. I'm just a teacher or a nurse or a social worker or a physical therapist or a realtor. I'm just solving the same problems I do every day just for this family. But I love this family, and I'm so honored that I get to help them. As I think about how we got started, I wonder if your community is similar to mine. 2.5 years ago, on social media and through our town's weekly newsletter, we announced that we were welcoming a refugee family. And we just invited anyone that wanted to get involved to email my wife or I. And we thought, we get 5, maybe 10 people. That would be amazing. We were shocked. We had over 120 people from our community eventually get involved. Add that to the 40 from our church, and we had over 160 people that were involved. There's Michael, a software engineer, who's an empty nester, offered up his mother-in-law apartment for a place for someone to stay. There's Linda, who is just going to drop off a TV, became the adopted grandmother of the Afghan children. And I wish I had time to tell you about Sally, Harry, or Brian, or Greg, or Janet, or Sarah. All of these people, 160 people who got involved from across the political spectrum that had no prior connection to our church, that got involved to make a difference with this family. One of the experiences that I loved was that during that time, even to this day, there are people that we've only known as acquaintances knock on our door and say, hey, I see what your church is doing. I'm not a religious person, but this is awesome, and I'm wondering if I can do something to help. And so our team has just grown and grown and grown from people inside and outside the church. See, I don't know if this describes your community, but mine has watched so much tragedy unfold around the world. And there is just a pent-up desire to help in some way. Liz mentioned August of 2021 with the fall of Kabul, and where we saw those cargo planes take off as families just were swarming the airport. And what I saw from our community is when one of those Afghan families arrived in Durham, New Hampshire, there were 160 people from our community that jumped in, that were ready to help. Michael opened his home. Linda, the adopted grandmother, she worked every day with the schools to make sure that those girls were going to succeed. She even arranged for private volleyball coaching sessions so those 2 teenage girls, Zainab and Zinat, would be able to play on the team with their new American friends. This is what I would tell myself 2.5 years ago. Every church, every faith community, every community group should be involved in this work, not because it's easy, not because it's glamorous, but because the very work shapes us to be people who are kind and generous and have the depth of character to care for the vulnerable. This work allows us to finally become the kind of people that we had hoped to be. What a perfect time in this current cultural moment for us to unite around this, around welcoming the stranger. This was never more clear than on March 22nd of 2022. We call this first day of school, last day of school. It was the first day of school for the 2 teenage girls from Afghanistan. And after we helped the girls on the bus, we learned that this was the last day of school in Afghanistan, that the Taliban had revoked schooling for girls over 12 years old. And I had a picture from that day. They were getting on the bus, one of those breathtakingly cold bluebird March days. And I sent that picture out to the 160 people from our community and said, you did this, you made this possible. And their response back was, let's do it again. We formed a team to welcome a Ukraine family. They said, let's do it again. And we formed more teams to welcome Haitian families. And then they said, let's do it again. We formed another team to welcome a family from Guatemala. It's gotten to the point now, 2.5 years, I can't tell who benefits more. And I am so excited just to be a part of what is happening here and across the country. And I just can't wait to see this mutual benefit grow in so many communities during this season. So appreciate everyone joining, and thank you for the opportunity to share our story here tonight.